It happens at times that some of the most brilliant and ingenious albums are born in circumstances that are apparently anything but optimal. Economic problems, personal trials, and troubles of every kind should, in theory, frustrate, if not outright kill, the creativity of any musician, even a seasoned rock star most accustomed to the grind. Nevertheless, it is well known that when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And it is precisely in such dire situations that some historical records have been conceived. This is definitely the case for Exile on Main Street, one of the most successful albums in the immortal career of the Rolling Stones, and arguably their most complex and influence-rich record, despite a production that could be described as nothing short of reckless. The story behind this long, colorful work is, in fact, studded with every sort of obstacle and delay, due to the most disparate causes. Yet, over 40 years after its publication, it continues to be considered a rock masterpiece. By some, even the definitive masterpiece of Mick Jagger's career. The 18 tracks that make up Exile on Main Street were written over a rather long interval of time, spanning from 1968 to 1972. During that period, the five members split from their producer to avoid paying him royalties on new material, had to relocate to France due to crushing British tax pressure, were forced to spend time and money on excessive overdubbing, and found themselves battling the repeated absences of various band members. In particular, Keith Richards, who was then plummeting into the lethal vortex of heroin. Any other musician, and probably any other human being, would have lost their mind or simply given up. Instead, against every difficulty, and with that innate greatness that only a chosen few possess, the Rolling Stones produced yet another milestone in their career. Exile on Main Street immediately commands attention, first and foremost for its cover, a bizarre collage of black and white photos and film stills. It is interesting to note how this artwork somehow symbolizes the multiple faces and the incredibly rich facets of the songs composed by the band as they maneuver effortlessly between rock and roll, blues, folk, country, gospel, and much more. The music, in short, constitutes a collage as well. An incredibly fresh and vital collage, despite a production that, as mentioned, is anything but up to par, with Mick Jagger's vocals frequently penalized. The dance opens with the usual intriguing riff by Keith Richards, soon joined by other instruments, including a zesty piano in the background and, subsequently, trumpets. The frontman's voice, however, is buried much too deep and fails to fully emerge, though it still contributes to the excellent drive of the track. Rip This Joint fares better from this point of view, with Jagger's vocals more present and particularly raucous by his standards, accompanied by yet another festival of instruments, among which the saxophone stands out. Third track, third style. This time we are dealing with Shake Your Hips, a cover of the famous bluesman Slim Harpo, where Keith Richards again takes center stage, although the rhythm section also handles the irresistible groove of the track excellently. Casino Boogie, instead, relies decisively on the rhythm section, but once again, the protagonist is the band's guitarist, as he is the one playing the bass. As was customary during the Exile on Main Street sessions, Bill Wyman was absent, so Richards took it upon himself to handle the bass duties, with the contribution of an added bassist later on. Next is one of the album's most famous tracks, Tumbling Dice, where we must signal, once again, a splendid choral performance by the band, but also a rather muddy production. especially in the final part, where Jagger's words become almost incomprehensible. A real shame, considering the quality of the song, which was chosen as the first single. Are your ears not yet accustomed to the colorful alternation of styles on this album? Then the next tracks won't help. We shift registers completely with the relaxing and evocative country vibes of Sweet Virginia and Torn and Frayed, the latter enriched by the presence of a piano. Regarding the former, more delicate in its entirety, rumor has it that country legend Graham Parsons participated in the backing vocals. He was in the same French city where the Stones had taken refuge at the time, and was a great friend of Richards. Fact or fiction? Perhaps it is just another legend of the rock world, but it remains a suggestive hypothesis, considering Parsons was defined as the white Jimi Hendrix by producer Terry Melcher. Sweet Black Angel maintains a relaxed, acoustic atmosphere with the addition of pleasant harmonica, but the lyrics are anything but serene, being dedicated to Black Panther activist Angela Davis, who was facing murder charges at the time. Loving Cup shifts again, sustained primarily by the piano and thickened toward the end by a saxophone. It might almost seem like a Bruce Springsteen track, if not, obviously, for the unmistakable voice of Jagger, suitably supported by Richards. Curiously, on the next track, the guitarist, not content with having taken the lion's share in most of the songs, steals both the scene and the microphone from his bandmate. On Happy, the microphone was passed to the guitarist due to the absence of the starter, and the definitive version pleased everyone. It is unusual for those accustomed to considering Mick Jagger, rightly, a totem, but it is certainly pleasant. Turd on the Run, penalized again by the terrible production that almost totally suffocates the frontman's voice, is otherwise a fast-paced rhythm piece, a blues track that invites you to dance on your chair wherever you happen to be listening. We remain in the warmest, most welcoming blues with the splendid Ventilator Blues, and it would have been better to stay there, as I Just Want to See His Face. The only truly unsuccessful track on the album is a sonic mess ravaged by a production that sounds like a demo recorded in the worst bars in Caracas. Little harm done, as Let It Loose immediately boosts the value of Exile on Main Street thanks to its melancholic pace and pleasant gospel backing vocals, while All Down the Line is rock and roll in its purest form, featuring a beautiful solo by Mick Taylor. You haven't had enough, have you? I hope not, since the final 3 tracks maintain a very high quality level, chasing away any semblance of boredom that, after so many songs, might legitimately creep in. Stop Breaking Down is a welcome and successful cover of Master Robert Johnson, the man of the deal with the devil. Shine a Light is a little gem ennobled by the organ, and a spine-chilling guitar performance by Keith Richards. It is no coincidence that Martin Scorsese opted for the title of this wonderful and perhaps underrated track for his documentary film on the Rolling Stones. The curtain falls with Soul Survivor, the stage for one of Mick Jagger's best performances, rendered unforgettable by the final sonic explosion, the perfect way to conclude the album. Having reached the end of this very long journey, there isn't much left to say. As Mick Jagger stated many years later, Exile on Main Street lacks a truly unforgettable track. A Satisfaction, a Paint It Black. In short, a hit of a few minutes that remains etched in the memory of every listener. It is likely true. There is no truly immortal piece on the album, although Shine a Light is a serious candidate. Nevertheless, If one considers that a very good work like Goat's Head Soup was almost penalized by the presence of one of these masterpieces, to the point of being remembered practically as the Angie album and little else, perhaps it is not a bad thing that Exile on Main Street lacks such a hit. It is possible, in fact, to let oneself be lulled by the album in its entirety, by the impressive variety of genres the Stones managed to tackle with indifference and absolute mastery. Are we facing the opus magnum of the band? Perhaps not, mostly due to the production, which cannot be ignored when judging a masterpiece. But are we facing a masterpiece? An album worthy of remaining etched in the history of rock and music in general? To these further questions, the answer can only be absolutely affirmative. Never was an Exile sweeter than this. Final score, 93 out of 100.